Hi there, welcome to this Integr8tor 2023.01 release video. My name is Dirk Leroy, I am with Ucamco in Belgium, and it's my pleasure to be your guide today on this small tour around our new software version. This is the overview of what I would like to talk about today, and as you can see, there is a variety of items in there. First of all, we start in the admin's corner to have a look at one or two practical aspects of the software installation itself. Then we turn to the application side of things with, first of all, an item on solder mask. Next, we will be looking at some extras in the upgraded QED PDF report. Related to that, but worthy of a separate entry, is a brief word on conditional formatting. After that, some items related to the job queue and job queue management. So then we are back at Cockpit. Then there is a couple of things I would like to share about performance and security enhancements we have incorporated into this new version. And finally, a mention about the upgraded DPMX import, also known as IPC 2581, and pointing out a number of code fixes you may find relevant and interesting. So as you can see, there's plenty to do. I suggest we get down to it. As we said, the first stop is in admin's corner, where I just want to point out one or two items related to not actually the installation of the server software itself, but the add-on that is needed on the client side. This version of Integr8tor comes with a cockpit that has been signed with a new certificate. Just like many other software companies, we must identify ourselves, and we do this by means of certificates. And for this new release, our previous certificate had expired, so we have now obtained a new certificate which has been incorporated in this version of Cockpit. So at the end of the server side installation, there will be this notice here where it will advise you of the fact that this is indeed the case, that there is this enhanced certificate now, and that therefore you have to remove your Integr8tor cockpit from your client stations. That's a bit different as it's normally the case. We do have cockpit upgrades quite regularly in intermediate or in new Integr8tor releases. But unfortunately, if you change certificate, you cannot just do an upgrade from an older cockpit A to a new cockpit B. That is not allowed by, I think it's the Air, which is blocking this, the Adobe Air. So what you need to do in order to get the new cockpit installed is basically remove the old one. So go to your client station, remove the old cockpit from one or the number of stations that you have it, and then install the new cockpit, which is part of this installation. If you would allow me, it is basically nothing more than just going from your control panel. If you're on Windows 10, like in my case, you would just go to the uninstall, and then you go and look for what is it? My Integr8tor cockpit. There it is. You right click, and that would remove the actual current installation from the client PC. And after that, as we said, you can install the new one. Having said that, you might be interested to hear or to see that installing the new cockpit can again work from the good old HTTP : / and then the name of your Integr8tor server. Now in my case, I'm going to do just localhost with the port 8080, and that is going to bring you this download page from which you can first accept the license agreement and then install Cockpit. Yeah. So don't forget, for this particular case, just to remove the old cockpit first. The certificate is valid for, I think it's 2 or 3 years. So once you've got this done, we're okay again for the next couple of revisions of software. The other thing next to Cockpit is please also download, if you're a Checkpoint user, please also download the Checkpoint installer. It used to be part of the complete Integr8tor installation, but since a couple of versions we have abandoned this, and the Checkpoint installer is now actually a individual installer, a package which you will find in the same FTP location as where you have downloaded your Integr8tor version from. Yeah, so don't forget, because you want the two to be in sync. So with your new version of Integr8tor, you also want your new version of Checkpoint, so that you don't run into any compatibility issues or whatever. The Checkpoint, on the other hand, is not affected by this certificate thing that we just had. So basically all you do is, after downloading it from the FTP, you just run it there. You don't need to do anything extra, no uninstall required. Okay. Right, I think that is, as far as software installation goes, I think that's all there is to say to this new version. So then let's move on to the real application side of things. And one of the first things that you see here is the point that we had about solder mask. Now, upon popular demand, we have been adding the color yellow to the list of solder mask colors. And it's before, let's see how I do this. What I would like to do is just pick up an archive here. Yeah, okay. And submit it to my Integr8tor server. I have an Integr8tor server running on the background, and what I'm doing here is I'm just sending this to a hot folder. You know that apart from the manual cockpit submit, there is a number of other job submit possibilities, which of which the hot folder is one of them. And so what I have done now is I have sent this to the hot folder for customer UCAMCO. And why am I doing this? Let's just first see if that has arrived. Yes, you see it has come in the meantime, and it's starting to process. Why do I do this? Because as you may know, these hot folders, they have sort of system in which you can specify a number of defaults for all the jobs that you send to this hot folder. Now, one of these items that you can specify if you send a job to Integr8tor via hot folder is amongst others, is the solder mask color. And as we have now are supporting yellow, you will see that also in here you can specify the color yellow. And as you can see here, I have exaggerated a little bit just to point out a nice a new feature, which is also part of this new cockpit. In the old days, if you spelled yellow like this, it would be, well, not yellow, but because yellow didn't exist then, but say that you spelled green like this with uppercase and lowercase mixed, or you forget the uppercase G, whatever. What would happen then is the color would actually be picked up correctly by your Integr8tor server. And you would see on your documents, you would also see that particular color. So as far as that was concerned, there wasn't any issue. However, if you would then later on go to your queue, the job queue, and you would click on the job and you would do a modify job, then you would find the solder mask color not to be filled out. And that was basically because if you look at the regular manual submit from Cockpit, where you would take an archive, if you look at this solder mask list here, you will now find it to contain yellow at the very end. But what I was saying is if you had a job that had not come through Cockpit submit, but via one of these other ways, and there was some uppercase, lowercase discrepancy between what you had done during your submit and what you saw the names in these lists here, or in this list with solder mask colors, then your solder mask color in your modified job would not be filled out. Whereas, as you can see now, the job has completed. It was submitted with this uppercase, lowercase mismatch, and we are picking this up correctly from now on in this read. So that's something I think it's very handy and nice to have. If we look at the results themselves, click on the job. That's what your color yellow as a solder mask, what it would look like. And also if we would go into, let's see, if we would go into QED, there's your top and bottom view. On the QED, it will still state it as it was submitted. So here you see my yellow in the odd spelling. But then further down, no, sorry, it was up here. So the images themselves, they will have been picked up correctly with some variation in color between copper underneath and not copper underneath. Okay. As far as email submit is concerned, there is basically nothing special to do. You know that when you're using email submit, then somewhere in your setup, your preferences, you will have this section here, the email section, where you can define these so-called codes. Yeah. Now, the code for solder mask, if you are using this, or if you were using this before, will probably already be featured in this list. So basically, the only thing that comes extra is if you would be sending off a data set via email, that in your subject line, when you're using the solder mask keyword, that you can now specify the color yellow along with it. Yeah, with the same observation, if it's uppercase or lowercase, it shouldn't really matter. Okay. Right, we don't need this. Good. So there's our solder mask yellow. Okay, if we go back to this overview, to this presentation, I think this is where we were. So submitted from, or supported, sorry, from Cockpit, email, and hot folder submission, so with the XGD, and it will have then the full specification or every support that you wanted in the QED. Talking of which, QED, there are some nice extensions to the QED. That brings me to my item number 2. One of these extensions is the split up of the copper to drill clearance that we have had for some time. So in previous reports or in previous software revisions, we were doing copper to plated clearance, copper to non-plated clearance, and if the case arised, copper to back drill clearance, yeah, if you happen to have a back drill job. But within these 3 categories that we used to have already, we are now doing a further split up into the clearance, not just to plate drill to copper, but plate drill to either pad, trace, or region. Yeah. And the reasoning is basically the same as with many of these split ups. Suppose that your minimum clearance between a plated drill and adjacent copper, that minimum would be between the hole and a region, so a copper pore. Chances are very high that you will be able to get past this during CAM, because copper pores and regions, you tend to shave them, and that will in many cases take care of the problem. Whereas if this minimum clearance were between a plated hole and a pad, for example's sake, then that would be an entirely different story, and you might want to talk to your customer upfront. So taking that into account, what we have done is we have reorganized a little bit the summary and some other aspects in the QED PDF to accommodate this difference. These items, and that is something that we will see later on, these new cells and these split ups, they are all conditional formatting enabled. So you will have the opportunity or a chance to make them red in case a certain threshold or a value is below a certain threshold. The overall lowest that we used to have as the single value in a previous report, that is still there. It's basically the first column of each of these three sections. Yeah, so that was the only value that you used to see on previous reports. And what you will have is also snapshots, or if you want these detailed images. They too, all of these cells, all of these items, they have been linked to a detailed image, which you can put at the bottom of your QED report. Well, I say bottom, but of course you put it wherever you want. Now let me just have a look. We have something here, conditional formatting, and if you would look into the QED for that one, here I overdid it a little bit. I do admit, at the time I ran this report, I think I had a threshold value of 305 microns or so. So just to show you that basically all of these cells here now, given the fact, or if they are below the required minimum, that they will just turn red like the other ones. I don't know how familiar you are with this conditional formatting, but basically, let me see here. What was it I was looking for? Oh no, the snapshots. I do apologize. We wanted to be at the snapshots. So yes, from each of these areas, you will now see the hand, and then at some point it becomes a pointing finger. And when you do the pointing finger, it will take you down to the image section. In my case, it's at the bottom of the report, just as for all the other ones. That's basically the convention. Everything that is in the summary copper layers here at the top will have a link to one of these images down there. Yeah. Right, so this is one where in the job that we are treating, it has just a plated drill and a non-plated drill. So as a result, we get copper to plated clearance and we get copper to non-plated clearance. And as we said, now being split up between path, trace, and region. I think I have another job here where, if my memory does not let me down, which one am I looking for? No, it's I think it's this one. I think it is one. This is a job that happens to have some back drill layers, and indeed, if that is the case, you will see that the report is slightly modified also to accommodate the section concerning clearances to the back drill holes, again with links to whatever you want it to be. Yeah, so that's all there. Just like the solder mask color, sorry, forgot to say, just like the solder mask color before, these extensions, they come free of charge, so they are part of the upgrade. Having said that, however, in my first item, I was talking about email submit and hot folder submit. Now, this by itself is, of course, a licensed item, but if you have the license for email submit, the color yellow will be supported in there, and these extensions to the QED reports that we just talked about, they will be there too. Okay, back to our presentation. We had this one. The extension at the summary table, the overall lowest, the snapshots, and then the conditional formatting. Next is actually a little zoom onto this conditional formatting. We just mentioned it in the previous item, but there too we have some extensions. Basically, there has been an increase in the number of cells that are eligible for this conditional formatting. As you know, this is just sort of colored cell call out that you can do in case a value that appears in this cell is lower than a certain threshold. Yeah. So we just looked at the summary copper section at the beginning of my report, and there we now have basically two tables in there. And as you saw in the example that I was previously showing, all of these cells are now eligible for conditional formatting. There was a time, I think, in the previous versions, you could do highlighting of copper width, but for instance, the trace width and a number of other ones, they had not they did not have this feature to turn red in case of too low a value. I don't know how familiar you are with this system of conditional formatting, but basically it comes from a setup file which is located in your webinf setups system. And what you will find in there is typically a file, well, a number of things, but one of the files, or the file that you're looking for, is your QED conditional formatting underscore unit. So you will find an underscore mm.example, or probably and probably also a underscore mil.example, depending on which unit your cockpit is in. So if you're working in millimeter, you go for the one, and if you are working in imperial, then you go for the mil variant. And what you do then is basically, I think I have something. This is not this one. Is it? Here it is. Yeah. So this is the start. This is where all the information is in, and then you just change the .example into .xml, and that basically will make your system aware of this feature for conditional formatting. What you will find now is in this example, you will see as comments, you will see all the extra fields or the field names that have been enabled with the software release to become part of the conditional formatting scheme. Yeah. So compared to previous versions, this list is noticeably longer. Sorry. You will find some in here, and then the one for the summary that we were looking at before have been incorporated already down here. Like you want to go and look for outer smallest clearance to plated, for instance, that would be the overall value. And then you have clearance plated to pad to trace to region, and then the same for non-plated to pad to trace to region, and then the same for back drill and overall the pad, the trace, and the region. Yeah. So that's where you will find this. If you're not comfortable with this, or if this is new, you haven't used this, but you might find this interesting, feel free to give the colleagues at the hotline a ring. They will be happy to assist in setting this up for you and making sure it runs the way that you want it to run. All right. So that was our conditional formatting. Next on our list was the job queue. Oh yes, the job queue has been extended with a number of nice possibilities. One of them is, and maybe therefore I can return to the actual hands-on part. I think I have, right. I have a folder here in which I have a number of zips, which I'm going to select all at once and send them to the same hot folder again. Now they will have a text and they all will be color yellow in solder mask, but that is not the issue here, because what is the issue is the following. So the 5 that I have just launched have appeared in my list of jobs in Cockpit. And as you can see, this is a workflow system, or this is an integrator system with 2 concurrent workflows. So that means that from the 5 that have arrived, 2 of these 5 are going to be processed immediately because I have 2 free workflows, whereas as many of them are going to be what we call scheduled. Yeah. So if you have a system with 4 workflows, there would be 4 that could be treated simultaneously, and another 4 would be sitting with a status scheduled. Now, in this column here, you see a priority. A priority is the way in which we want the system to pick up the jobs, the preference, the order that we're going to be worked on. And what we have done now, previously it was not possible to have, once a job was scheduled, it was actually taken by the system. And you would not be able to change its priority anymore, for instance. Now, in a number of cases, if you have to meet deadlines and you have jobs that run longer, or that are going to take longer. This meant that you had maybe to stop or abort a running job and do hocus pocus or stop or abort a scheduled job to then take another job in front of it. So it was a bit of hocus pocus from time to time, and it wasn't always very convenient to work that way. As I said, certainly in periods of high load where there was a lot of stuff to do and a lot of stuff waiting. So that is why, as you can see, we have changed this so that jobs that are running, they are running. I mean, the only thing that you can do there is abort them. But other than that, once they have started, they continue. But the jobs that are waiting to be processed, so the ones in the scheduled state, is something where you are now allowed to go and change priorities in order to be able to put still one before the other. That is one of 2 items with respect to this job queue. If we look at the other, it's something which is a little bit typical. Most of you probably will not be in that situation, but we have a few cases where the queue mode or the schedule runs in a sort of fast mode. The scheduler is basically a piece of software that is looking towards the outside, see what's coming in, and then decides you go first and you go next, sort of figure of speech. Now, there is a rate with which this scheduler looks at the things that have come in, yeah. And by default, don't take my word for it, but I think it's around every 10 seconds or so. But in some cases, at some installations, this scheduler is running at a higher polling rate, as we call it, so that the scheduler would be looking at every second or every 3 seconds or every 5 seconds. And in those cases, it was not possible to abort jobs. Had to do with race conditions and all sorts of complicated stuff. So that's something that we have changed too. We have revised this, and job queues, schedule queues, which are running at a high polling interval, are now also allowed to have these jobs deleted that have gone past the scheduler. Okay. Good. That brings us to a number of performance and security enhancements that I would like to point out. A number of areas. Typically, productivity enhancements comes down to, in many cases, comes down to either speed or more accuracy. The case of the first one, the outer layers, largely uncovering the outer layers, so the PCB's outer layers, largely uncovered from mask, is basically something that you would or could see here in this particular job. It's a job in which maybe I can take it to my DPMX WE. It's a job in which the solder mask, contrary to what we are used to see, basically uncover more of the board than what it covers, and that has nothing to do with positive or negative. It's basically just the way things are. There you go. No. So if this is my copper this would be the solder mask. So that means that we have the correct polarity because this is where your pads of your component are going to land. So they are clear of solder mask, but that means that all this red area is also clear of solder mask. Now, in those cases, a number of calculations that were done to populate the QED, they were suboptimal. And I think that the case that we are looking at here is basically something where the processing time was reduced by nearly 80% or so, something along those lines. So it's quite substantial if you have these cases, and you will be happy to find the system performing at this kind of level. Legend layer analysis is same story, but different area. Let's say it's a case where in legend layers we received a number of cases where legend layer contained a whole lot of different contour apertures. Now that too in the old days could lead to a decrease in performance, and in as of this version, we have sort of reworked the legend layer analysis so that it can cope first of all with this sort of situation, because we had a number of jobs in which the system would simply fail to complete the analysis because of this. But there too, legend layer and legend layer analysis has been revised, and you should see speed improvements there if you're confronted with data sets that feature this particular sort of configuration. Furthermore, there is outline layer recognition. Outline recognition is always, I mean, in itself, it's not a question of being fast or slow, but if your outline is not correct and you have a job that processes 30 minutes and then you want to correct the outline, it means that you start more or less from the very beginning again. So it's important that outlines are picked up correctly right from the start. And we had a sort of inefficiency, let's call it, in the case where you had these sort of, it was typically always on assembly panels where you had a number of PCBs, usually put side by side without any clearance in between. And then there was some sort of drawing to designate all this, but the drawing also designated the sort of rails that you have on your assembly panel. And in those cases, the decisions that we took in terms of outline wasn't always the best. So we have reworked that particular aspect of the outline recognition. And I mean, all the jobs that you see here, they're basically pretty much from the same, you could say, from the same idea. It's always about assembly panels sometimes, or in most of the cases, it's the same PCB. In one case, there is mixed PCBs, but it was always this thing where you had different PCBs combined together and then finding the correct outline. So that too has been improved. If you happen to receive that type of data a lot, I hope you will find the current version to do a better job than before. Then there is like some two evergreens, things that we always try to fiddle into new versions. There is the recognition of drill file names, or in this case, in this revision of the software, also back drill file names. So we have extended the engine with a number of new sets of designating drill files as such. Drill files, their span, the span of the drill files, and and also the category of the back drills. Yeah, so typically in the naming of a back drill, you will find, I don't know, BD or BDR or hup, and then it will have a from and a to layer. So it's that sort of thing that has been upgraded again in this version. But as I said, that's something that we try to do for every revision. So keep sending these data sets where we don't pick this up correctly from the beginning. And as we receive them, we always try and fiddle in some common ones, or the ones that seem to appear a bit more than the other ones, that we try to fiddle them in next versions. Same is true of stack-up recognition improvements. So there we're talking about the Gerber layer names to make sure that we have them in the correct stacked order from 1 to whatever the highest number is. And then finally, not as much to do with performance, although, but much more with security. This version of the software comes with an extra security, which the people of you, or those of you who are using the rebuild job output, where the integrator server at the end of the calculations, and if everything is okay and you've made whatever modifications, if one had to be made, when the job is at the end, you can actually output what we call a rebuild job. That's where the flashes are flashed and where the painted areas have been contourized, that sort of thing. We have secured this step, this outputting of the rebuild job. We have secured this by a software image compare. So what we do is, when we have done all the hocus pocus with the replacement and the data changing of the data structure, at the end what we do is we take the initial image and we take what we think is the rebuild image, and then we do a compare layer by layer, or a layer by layer compare on each of these layers. And of course, what you want to see, this is an excerpt from a job log file, but what you want to see is basically always this one, that rebuild image compare revealed no errors, and then it means that it's okay. And as a user in the cockpit, you will not notice if everything is okay. However, I think I have one where we forced it into some. Where is it? Let me see. This is the condition. Oh, there is one. Yeah. In the case that the image compare would fail, what we will do is we will refrain from outputting a rebuild job, because we assume that the rebuild job, that would be the base input for a CAM department, and you don't want to give something to the CAM department that you're not sure of. So as soon as we suspect the slightest difference or whatsoever, we will refrain from outputting the rebuild job, and we will bring this to your attention in the critical remarks section in Cockpit. So there you will find a history or a log, or if something has gone wrong, you will find it here. If not, these things, the critical remarks, they just, this is an area which is typically used for this sort of thing, the critical remarks. So as long as you have 0 there, you should be okay, and all is good. Okay, so far for the performance and security upgrades. Let's see, I think we're getting towards the end of our list. We have, I think, one more item on DPMX, or IPC2581, as it was previously called. And what we do there is we started supporting input of DPMX in Integr8tor, I think 1 or 2 versions ago. But we started off with a limited set of features. I mean, obviously, copper-wise, we would pick up everything, and drill-wise, and solder mask and whatever. But a part that we had not been paying attention to too much was basically the attribute information, which can be into a DPMX file. One of the first ones to be taken care of in this version is the fiducial, or the support for fiducials. And if we would have another look in, is there this one here? If I would take this again to my, oh, it's already open. There you go. If I would take this job after input into my UCAMX, UCAMX or UCAMX-WE has this little tool here, which is called the markup assistant, which allows you to highlight paths with certain characteristics. And you see here that amongst this red, there are a number of things which are green here. And basically, the green comes from this fiducial path. So for the moment, we have not done any markup. So basically, copper is just copper, but we don't tell it, you're an SMD path, and maybe you are a VIA path. That is something that has not taken place. It's not necessarily part of the DPMX file either, but in this case, what was part of the DPMX file is this fiducial information. There was 8 in total of them. Those are the 8 green dots that you see here. And if you would go, for instance, on one of these and you would query this object, where is my query? Where is my query? Here it is. You would see that it is indeed, it has become, so in the UCAM environment, it has obtained a flash type called fiducial path. And because there are different types of fiducials, global and local fiducials in DPMX, we also store the information whether it was a global one or a local one. Now that in turn, this information, if you would look at one of the videos of UCAMX, and more in particular yellow and solder mask adjuster, we have made some extensions there as well to be able to cater for fiducials in the data. Because fiducials, they don't tend to be critical in terms of clearance to adjacent copper, but they sort of tend to be a bit picky on the mask opening that you want on top of this. So you want to know if there are any fiducials, so that you can be sure that if you change your mask opening on these fiducials, that you're going to be respecting what needs to be respected. The other two that you would find sitting opposite here, this one and this one, if you do the same query object on there, that would state them as local fiducials, yeah, because their purpose is probably to assist in positioning this this component right. Yeah. So that's the DPMX input. Where is my PowerPoint? Here is the PowerPoint. One small item, but that's basically a real exotic one. We had a number of cases or a number of examples where I think it was single layer boards, yeah, just one copper layer. If you looked at the drill information that was specified, the way it was specified, I think it was something like the DPMX file said that this drill file goes from layer 1 to layer 0 or something somewhat absurd. So in theory, it's I think it's not according to the DPMX standard, but because it was a fairly easy thing to do, we just now take care that if these things come along, we just interpret this span definition and think, well, this is probably meant to be, if it's on a single layer copper, just going through the copper, and that's end of story. So that too should be taken care of. Good. This brings us to the last point, which is the code fixes. Not that I am going to go through all of them, but this is a work in progress list here. I just want to call out a couple of them, which you should find interesting. You cared to report to us a number of cases where we were missing a critical copper width, and we just qualified it as a minimum copper width. You know, this thing with the, is it netlist relevant, yes or no? So we had a few cases coming in from you via the hotline. So that's something that has been attended to. There was this how would I call this dialect or this variant of the excellent format where the headers all of a sudden had a lowercase c, which sort of upset the input process a little bit. There is things with some repaint issues, not too bad, but still it might be confusing, and it's nice to have it away. If you're using SpeechStack, there was an issue when you return from SpeechStack that things were not always the way you wanted to be. Jobs with castellated holes. Sometimes the images were not the images in the QED, so the data was correct, but the images on the QED showed something a little bit off or a little bit weird. So that was something that we attended to as well. We had a number of cases where if you were working on an outline in the UCAMX WE editor, so the UCAMX that plugs into your integrator and into your cockpit, that the changes to your outline that you made there, they would get lost during the rest of the process again. So anyway, as I said, I'm not going to go through all of them, but do have a look when you download the version. It's always interesting to see if there is anything in there that can be of help to you. Okay. Right. I think that brings us to the end of this video. I do hope you have enjoyed it. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again very, very soon. Bye for now.